Thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking time out to join us. I was so impressed when I discovered your work. The first article I found, someone had reposted your video about UFOs and the question of contact, and on their YouTube. And I was trying to find out. They posted it in 9 parts, and I was trying so hard to find out what is the name of this video. Where did it originally come from? So I watched all 9 parts all the way till the end, and finally I saw your little tagline there with your website. Almost so hard you could miss it. Very German, like just very subtle right there. You have to really. And I went to your website and I was knocked out. I was like, wow, what is all this? I mean, this. But before we get into that, just tell us a little bit about yourself. You're living in California and you're originally from Germany, correct?
Yeah, well, my story in a nutshell is I was actually born in Los Angeles here. My parents are from Germany, but they studied at UCLA. And when I was 1 year old, they moved back to Germany, to Munich. That's where I grew up. And then when I was 22 in '94, I moved back here, basically, to study drums and percussion. I was going down the music road. And I played in bands and did the whole music things, and then, over the course of time, through my own process, I started questioning the world more, and, and things didn't line up for me, and, through my own struggle and suffering, trying to adjust to a pathological world, I just dug deeper and deeper, and then I naturally came across all these topics, got more interested, and studied and researched and started writing about them. And here I am, And, after my music career, so to speak, then I also got more into the healing arts like yoga, body work, and I'm a body worker now. That's how I make my living. And,
So you do body work in Topanga, California, in Los Angeles?
Exactly. I live in Topanga Canyon, which is close to Los Angeles. It's between Malibu and Venice, basically.
Yeah. I used to live in Venice. I'm familiar with the area. So by body work, you mean like yoga and just healing
Body work
people?
is like massage, but the body work, it's just there's so many different modalities, and, I combine all kinds of different healing techniques and help people, on a one-on-one level to their bodies to work through their issues.
I'm sure it's quite potent considering the sheer breadth of traditions that you draw upon. That first article that I read went into Gnosticism, and it drew upon the Gnostic Christian tradition to really explain the true nature of these beings we call aliens. That article really just absolutely blew me away. I can't stop talking about it. I sent the link to all my friends. We've got about 250,000 views on there on YouTube. I have to ask, your journey towards really like questioning that, like, are these really aliens? How did that start? Like,
my own quest with it, or
your own quest.
Well, I've been always. I mean, even childhood. I mean, I grew up, and I remember always being alone and staring at the sky and like, what else is out there? I was always very intrigued by the mystery of life and this planet and the universe. And I always, deep inside, there was always something within me like there must be more than what we know and what we're presented with here and how we live our lives, right? So, with the advent of the internet, or it became more popular towards the end of the 90s, I got more into these topics. I was introduced first, I think I first came across David Icke's work around the mid-90s or so. Touched upon these topics and was like, oh, and then at the beginning I really just jumped into it and, took everything in like a sponge, and I was back then not very, critical.
Giant reptiles, right?
Uh-huh.
The giant reptiles.
Yeah, exactly. So I was just like, oh my God, this is fascinating, and and I got just more interested and connected all these dots, and then I also came across the work of Lorna Yajic, which we talked about.
Yes. Amazing breadth of work. That lady's amazing.
Incredible woman, and very misunderstood woman.
Of course.
A lot of attacks, and most people who haven't actually read her whole work, and kind of put their logic before grammar, talking about the trivial. But she really opened up my reality to the whole new view of this whole phenomenon, in particular the hyperdimensional aspect, and how it several esoteric teachings talk about it in their own terms. In particular, what you talked about, esoteric Christianity, right? Before the church or, dogmatic religion have distorted these deeper esoteric truths in Christianity. Even in the Bible, obviously the Bible has been used for social control, but there are a lot of esoteric truths in it when you kind of dissect and look through it.
That's one of your favorite sayings. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly. That's the whole thing. Truth is mixed with lies. It's not black and white. You know what I mean? Like of everything. Even like I've become very critical of David Icke, for example. I think he kind of doesn't understand the whole UFO phenomena with his shape-shifting. You're almost shape-shifting.
My green screen.
With his shape-shifting reptilians and this whole, Queen Elizabeth is a shape-shifting lizard and all that stuff. So, but at the end, he also speaks some truth, and again, it's about being very discerning, and the devil is in the details, right? So it's just all about connecting the dots and finding the common thread, so to speak.
And you certainly did find a common thread. Just talk about myself for a moment. In my experience, the hardest thing to find is the pattern of deception. Like this spiritual infection we're up against. We call it psychopathy, ponerology. It has a very unique pattern. It's always 180-degree lies constantly, complete inversion of truth constantly, projection, narcissism. Once you figure out that pattern, it seems you can pick the truth from the lies. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, it's kind of, there's a saying, it's to see the unseen, you know what I mean? To look behind the veil and look behind the mask, and then you see actually what's going on, you know what I mean? Like what you just mentioned, psychopathy, with and ponerology and psychopaths and power, and once you understand how they operate or how they talk, it's literally, truth is lies, ignorance is strength, peace is war, the exact opposite, and they tend to project onto others what they actually are.
Exactly.
Themselves. And, it's really important to understand also that, what I write about as well, how over our whole society over thousands of years have what Lobachevsky calls has become ponerized, meaning that our world and society at large has taken on pathological characteristics and values that have become normalized, and people don't perceive pathological individuals as such anymore because it has become the way of life, right?
Yeah, it's all the Game of Thrones.
Right, and then there's the other fallacy. We see in the New Age, for example, about the whole idea we are all one,
Yeah.
And based on that oversimplified mem, so to speak, projecting outwardly that we must be all the same, which is not the case. We see a lot of people project qualities into our leaders that they don't necessarily have.
Absolutely.
But they have a cunning mask of sanity, meaning they have a mask which they have learned over their lifetime to adjust to fake emotions, to, appear in a certain way in order to manipulate and deceive.
Now, this is a very interesting question because people use these words, sociopath and psychopath, all the time. And what is the difference between them? Are they the same thing? Could you define them for us?
Well, I wrote an article about it when I actually confronted Marianne Williamson on the topic of psychopathy.
Yeah.
I asked if she's aware of it, and she didn't answer the question. I laid out all her fallacies in a response in the article, but she, for example, shifted it right away. The attention from psychopaths, called them sociopaths, which, and you can actually, nowadays they're almost one and the same, but the more subtle distinction is that sociopaths actually have taken on pathological values or issues through conditioning, upbringing, and they're more, conditioned pathological behaviors, as opposed to psychopaths in the terms that a lot of research has come out, like Lobachevsky. We're talking about genetic psychopaths who are born this way, and it's not a psychological disposition, and it's not been caused through childhood wounding or anything like that. And that's a hard thing for many, many people to accept, was even for myself, that there are, psychopaths out there, and they're drawn to positions of power who are born psychopaths, and they cannot be healed or helped within any conventional ways of psychological healing or anything like that.
Now, I saw that interview or that question that you asked Miss Williamson, and you certainly pushed one of her buttons, but she got very nervous and she really worked very hard to try to deflect the question. As you said, really makes me wonder about her. But so a little more clarification. A psychopath is born that way.
Yeah, the
And
way
so,
I use it and the way the research presented, I'm talking about genetic psychopaths who are born this way. And according to the research that's out there, it's approximately 6% of humanity are born psychopaths, and they're drawn mostly to positions in high power.
wow.
So that's something to consider because, on website, there's this great excerpt I posted of, forgot the researcher who writes about the mask of sanity, to give an example of how these individuals think, and it's so hard for us to actually put ourselves into their position to really have zero conscience, no any feelings of guilt, remorse, or compassion or empathy, but completely narcissistic and just, doing anything to advance. And on top of it, they actually, it's not just, a lot of people talk about greed and they want more money and power. Yes, that's surely part of it, but they literally feed off of inflicting pain and suffering on others. It almost gives them some sort of pleasure.
And there's no healing these people. There's no sending enough love.
No, that's the whole New Age trap, you know what I mean? And misunderstanding of evil, and then there is no such evil, and we just need to have compassion and empathy and project love and light. And I'm not throwing out the baby off the bathwater again about empathy and compassion. We need that, but there are such things as, born predators, and it's also, understanding that we need to make our boundaries and say no instead of yes, and helping and trying to, heal another person when there's no coming through, right? So it's again, the whole nature of evil is very, very much understood as well,
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's the first and foremost question of our times, conditioning us normal, gentle folk to understand that there are predators out there that look human but aren't human. Have you ever seen that movie, They Live, with Roddy
Yes,
Piper?
totally. Yeah. Great 80s movie with the 20-minute fight scene or something. I don't remember.
Yeah, that fight scene between Roddy Piper and Keith Kevinson was brilliant because he drew it out for so long. It was so ridiculous, but he was trying to make a point. It's so hard to wake up the average human.
Good point.
After,
but that's yeah. But that's also, esoterically speaking, it's actually a good point because that's what I realized too, and I've fallen into that trap myself because once you see and you're so excited, you want to tell other people and make them aware, but you can't push information on others. You can't make other people see, and then actually from an esoteric perspective, you infringe on free will. You can only give if it's asked for, and the asking has to be sincere, right? You have to respect other people's free will to stay ignorant, basically. So you can spread some seeds of awareness, see if they sprout, you know what I mean? But you cannot push information on others. And I have, learned that the hard way as well. I got a lot of attack and from friends and family members because they're saying, you got to see this, you got to check this out. And everyone's like, no, I mean, it's literally what Morpheus said in The Matrix. Some people are so, plugged into the Matrix and the system, they do anything and fight for their lives in order to protect that,
absolutely.
Identification.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people in their hearts, in fact, I dare say most people in their hearts know the truth, but they just don't have the emotional strength to accept it. If they did, their whole world would be destroyed. They're trying to protect their sanity,
Good point. Well, this ties into cognitive dissonance, right? When you're presented with contradictory information and it creates a really uncomfortable feeling inside of you, and in order to find balance and reject this, we all have a tendency of unconscious defense mechanisms to deny and avoid, right? Because if you, like you said, it would open up a can of worms for many people to acknowledge some of the dark aspects that's happening on our world, I mean, for a simple example, 9/11, right? I mean, just applying basic critical thinking, you can see that the official story has so many holes and inconsistency, it doesn't make sense. But then going down, researching it more, following the thread, and realizing that it has been indeed an inside job, so to speak, and admitting to oneself that your own government is responsible for all of that, while your whole life you have believed the government is there for you, and your whole life is based on that. Admitting that, would open up a whole kind of worms to reconsider one's whole life and beliefs in general, and not many people can go there. There's peer pressure as well, then there's fear of career image or what other people may think of you. So in that sense, the matrix, like in a Stockholm syndrome-like setup, keeps itself in place, right? Where people police each other, so to speak, not to step out of the herd.
Absolutely. We see that now in our post 9/11 society at every turn. It's scary times, but I think knowledge, and that one of the main points of your article is that knowledge is the key to really fixing this. Like consciousness means being having knowledge together, right? Being
exactly. Consciousness, by definition, means know more together. Con together, science says know, aware. So it is, and the evolution of consciousness is to learn more, to understand more, to gain more knowledge, to become more aware, to see things more objectively, and I'm not claiming that we will ever be able in our state to completely see objective reality, but evolution of consciousness implies working towards a more objective view of the world and oneself. And when I talk about knowledge, it's also not simply information or memorizing and facts and whatever, but really like embodying knowledge, understanding it, applying it, and not just, and it entails self-work as well. It goes hand in hand, the inner and outer work, because we need to tune our inner being, so to speak, through deconditioning, so we can actually separate truth from lies and gain true knowledge, which helps us in our personal evolution and the evolution of the collective, so to speak.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, you draw upon the trivium and the quadrivium, two systems of learning that are now occulted, but they used to be standard fare, absolutely elementary. So they've been weeded out of our system and replaced with Twitter and all manner of other distractions.
Well, education. I mean, I haven't been taught, nobody has been taught that in modern education, that the basics of critical thinking, right? And in that order, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, to first ask the questions, who, what, where, when, and then make your conclusions after your research. And I see it a lot, in my work when people attack my work or other people's work, even on Facebook, when I just post an article or video and people post right away or comment without actually reading what has been posted or watching what has been posted first, and then stick to the point, and then we all, people engage in logical fallacies and, all the basic of critical thinking. And that's something I had to refine on myself because I was falling into the same trap, when I've had to learn to think more critically and understand, really understand the basics of logical fallacies and whatnot. And, understand how our emotions can get in the way. The whole issue of resonating, for example. Like a lot of people, well, this doesn't resonate with me, this resonates with me, and there's some truth to resonating, but if you really haven't worked on yourself clearly, like the resonating can be actually wishful thinking, like an emotional attachment, like a hook. A lot of New Age people say, oh, I resonate with this channel material, and that's why it must be truth. Well, it's not any different than fundamentalist Christians resonating with the Bible in the literal sense, that emotional projection, so to speak. So I think there's definitely truth to resonating and intuition in that sense. Once we have really dove more into our own self-work, work through our own conditioning, deprogramming all the bias and filter, in which we take information, and then we can connect to our true self, and that's where the true resonating and intuition comes from, And the trivium helps with that as well, obviously. Just the basics of critical thinking. But again, there's the logic of the trivium and understanding basic logical process, but then there's also the intuitive side, where we get impressions beyond the five senses. I feel that can be very insightful. Our gut feeling, so to speak, sometimes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So
It sounds
it
like
sounds like
I'm getting an echo.
an echo.
It sounds like
It
it's a
sounds like it's a
three-step
three-step
process.
process.
Uh,
Uh,
First learning,
First learning,
and not knowing how to
knowing
think,
how to
rather,
think, rather,
quitium and
medium
trivium,
for everything,
and then
and then
absorbing the
absorbing the
knowledge
knowledge,
and processing it.
processing it.
Right.
And then what comes
And then
after
what
that?
comes after that?
Once we're all
Once we're all
conscious,
conscious,
What do you mean? Once we're all conscious?
once we all have the
once we all have the
knowledge
knowledge
together
Well,
and
together,
we're coming together like
coming
me and
together
you.
like me and you.
right.
I just found
Well,
yourself.
it's a process. You know what I mean? It's a process, and what I'm also getting more into is also understanding that this process is different for each of us. I feel, sometimes in all of us, our individuality gets lost. I feel we all have certain lessons to learn and talents to develop that are different for each. There's truth to karma. Certain karma we all have to work on an individual basis, and there's even such thing as personal truth. A lot of people say, "Oh, there's no such thing as truth. There's just your truth." There is objective truth. There's objective reality, but I feel there's personal truth in the sense of that is your own sole purpose, your personal path, the lessons you have to learn and talents you have to give, right? So the more we work on ourselves, come in tune with our true self, and walk the path, then you automatically, help others in the same process, and we can kind of help each other in the process of the evolution of consciousness. So, so it's the work is twofold: it's the inner work and the outer work. So it's definitely gaining about knowledge and seeing things as they are, as the universe sees itself, individually and collectively. So we, move away from subjective perceptions to more objective seeing, right? And truly see the truth of what it is. And at the same time, honor our own process, and working through our programming, deconditioning ourselves from any, things we've taken on our lives, childhood wounds. I feel there's a big part is also just basic psychological self-work. Right? And again, that's different for each.
Absolutely. So,
can you hear me? It's kind of the screen.
Yeah, I can hear you very well.
Very well.
I'm just hearing an echo.
Just hearing an echo.
So that's why I'm going to take these.
That's why I'm going to take these points.
So my own voice doesn't interrupt my speaking.
I hear it fine. I don't hear an echo from my end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your article and your amazing documentary. There have been 3 of them. And Know Thyself. Which is 15 minutes. And I believe it asks the question. How much do you really love truth? Could you talk about that documentary?
You just cut out there. What did I talk about? I didn't hear
it. Your documentary, Know Thyself.
Yeah.
It asks the question, how much do you really love truth?
Right. Exactly. That comes down again what we talked about before. Cannot make into others. That's the really has to come myself. How much are you really giving? Able wanting to give of yourself to go there and dig and search your own inner drive. Your passion, your sincere asking. That's, and also being open to it in the sense that there's a necessary part of disillusionment. That it is enlightenment is a destructive process for seeking truth, because it exposes everything that is false within and without. So it's not an easy process, because it goes virtually against everything what our official culture is based on. It can be a very hard road and lonely road at times, and you being ridiculed and attacked and all these things. So that's what I think every quote unquote seeker needs to ask him or herself, how sincere and how much do I really want to go there, because it's work. It requires work. It's not an easy path. But in the end, the only way out is through, so to speak. And it can be hard and tough. But I feel in the end, truth will lead us to true love. To really and engage in the process of conscious evolution to raise our awareness and raise our consciousness, and in that process help others as well, right?
Absolutely. I have to admit, I would never have entertained this topic of psychopathy and how prevalent it is and how deeply rooted it is unless I had experienced it firsthand, which
Yeah.
I did. A
Right.
psychopath and a sociopath teamed up and came after me and several of my friends. So I had to defend all of us, and it's been an ongoing struggle. It's really amazing their mindset. Once you expose them, they still continue to keep on going. Like they have
Yeah.
no real perception
Yeah.
of shame or anything like that. They're just like machines.
Absolutely. That's why I mean, in the research I quoted, like the most and foremost thing when you actually encounter a psychopath in your life is disengage, like disconnect, don't even engage, do not try to reason, rationalize. And I had similar experiences as well in my life, and now after I understand psychopathy, about really like, oh my god, you know what I mean? So I don't project my own qualities in the other person, like always trying to make him or her understand, and like, can we talk about it, rationalize, when there's no getting through. And this is actually what they feed off, that conflict constantly.
That's very true. The more you attack them, it's like food for them, and they're
Yes.
always trying to get a rise out of you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you've been attacked, of course.
Yes. I had my share, most definitely. Yeah.
Well, we can relate. They say only the victims of psychopaths really understand them.
Yeah. Well, I can say, I mean, luckily I haven't experienced what other people have experienced, you know what I mean, especially in, some relationships get involved with the psychopath, and, and it can be, very, very disturbing, and obviously there are much darker aspects of our reality that's going on most people are not aware of, and it goes into like pedophilia and like all these darker aspects of what's happening in our world.
So that's the question. The spiritual side of this psychopathy. It's not just chemicals in the brain, right? There's something else.
Yeah, for there's something else, which you're hinting at, which maybe ties into the topic of all topics, the UFO and the hyperdimensional alien topic. It seems more like, and I make that case in that documentary as well, that these psychopaths are like portals for these hyperdimensional negative beings to work through. You know what I mean? And create almost a society where they have have influence society through these psychopaths for which they work through and implement their agenda, which is total control and literally taking care of their quote-unquote food source. Because that's my whole, the whole deeper topic of this UFO phenomena, which I talk about in the video. And again, I want to make clear that a lot of things I say, it's not like I came up with them and it's anything new. I just really highlighted the research of amazing researchers that is pretty acknowledged. One of them is Dr. Carla Turner, then Laura Knight-Yajik, and then going back to, the archons, other esoteric teachings, and just connect the dots. And a lot of basically what comes down to that humanity is not on top of the food chain. And there are other beings in control who feed off of us energetically. And, and it's a hyperdimensional phenomenon, but which a lot of people also don't understand. They get kind of trapped in the whole Hollywood Star Trek nuts and bolts scenario of the alien phenomena, realizing it's for most part an interdimensional phenomena where these beings work through other people in order to manipulate us and feed off of us.
Wow. So this is the topic of topics.
As Don Juan called from Castaneda, the topic of all topics. Yeah.
That's quite the statement.
Yeah, it is. When you really go down that rabbit hole, it's like, whoa,
This is something you really have to deal with, huh?
Yeah, and once you really understand, like we saw before, once you see the thread, like Laura Knight-Yajik talks about, she did a lot of research in history and see the unseen, you see the hyperdimensional thread throughout history, And how we've been manipulated for thousands and thousands of years by beings we're not even, most people are not aware of they even exist, right?
Absolutely.
The trap is this anthropocentric view of reality we have. We feel like, oh, it's just ourselves and we do everything to ourselves, there's nothing else, as if we're like the, pinnacle of God's creation. And also the fallacy that non-physical beings on a higher density are more evolved, spiritual, and only positive. That's also the trap, so to speak. And then, especially because the deception is so cunning and subtle, and most often, which in many of the esoteric teachings it's talked about as well, most often Satan appears as angels of light, negative forces appearing as positive ones.
Absolutely. And that was one of the best things I got from your work. You really call out the guys that are coming out and saying, oh, the aliens are our friends, they're evolved beings of light trying to help us, but hey, they're, they just, mutilate our cattle sometimes and abduct our mothers and children and anally probe them, but they're just trying to help us evolve. So.
They're just doing it for our own good. It's like cosmic Stockholm syndrome, I don't know.
That Stockholm syndrome is so real, because when I noticed it myself when I got attacked by these psychopaths. You'd see the weaker people around us rush to accuse us when we were just defending ourselves, accuse us of being aggressive. It's like the abused woman syndrome.
Exactly, gaslighting and all of that.
It's just so painful to watch and see how weak these people are. Like, you're not even willing to defend yourself. You're going to attack me for trying to defend myself and you. It was very disheartening, but you realize humanity has been weakened over time. And these psychopaths, they have no real power. All they can do is talk, and they just apply pressure. But you come to realize it's not just the words coming out of their mouth. There's also a spiritual pressure coming from them as well.
What do you say, that spiritual pressure?
Pressure, yeah, it's not just the words or the threats coming from their mouth. There's something else, putting pressure on these people, these weaker souls, and if they don't have the spiritual strength or connection to deflect that, they'll be affected. That's how I rationalize it now.
Exactly. Well, it comes down to the warrior principle, to also stand your ground, to say no, and I feel like, for example, the New Age has kind of distorted it with the emphasis of the divine feminine, the goddess, you know what I mean? And that's fine and good. We need to, bring both into balance. But, I like some of Mark Passio's work. I don't know if you heard of him, but he talks about the suppression of the sacred masculine, where we need to stand up in our warrior, male, just energy for both men or women, and say no, and kind of also be grounded in our righteous anger, to stand up. Anger is not negative. Anger is negative when you react mechanically and project it on others and fall into violence and all of this, but anger is a necessary defense and energy to stand up against abuse,
Absolutely. Absolutely. You mentioned in your article that some people that were abducted by these aliens, when they began to show anger and rage at these beings, they would just run off.
They were just, got all confused, and actually, it's interesting when a lot of very high, strange things happened when I was making this documentary. And by the way, just on the side note, all these 3 documentaries I made with my very good, talented, and creative friend Umberto Braga. It was actually his idea to make videos based on my writings. So I just wrote them, narrated them, I did the music, but he did all beautiful editing and visual work and all of that,
And it was amazing. The visuals and the editing are top notch, absolutely beautiful. I was so impressed. It was I had to do an interview the day I saw it.
Yeah. So when we were doing the UFO documentary it was a lot of work over the course of maybe 2 or 3 months. Some interesting things happened, and as I said, I'm a body worker and I had clients, and some of my clients I had during this time I was making an interview actually turned out that they were abductees. And, sometimes I check in with my clients, how you feel, do you have any dreams? they told a couple of them told me about their dreams, and it was pictured abduction-like. You know what I mean? Like how they saw themselves, and all of a sudden this being on next to the bed. They saw a spaceship out there. Like they explained all of that. Had no idea what I'm doing, who I am, what kind of research I'm into at all. They just appeared out of nowhere. And one of the persons, and and I'm like, I have to be externally considered as well. You know, I cannot just like, oh, you're like, this is what's going on. You're being abducted from aliens. You have to be very careful where they're at. I'd freak them out even more. You know, so I'm just try to be very externally considerate and help them out, give maybe some hints here and there. But I also suggested this, for example, like the standing on your ground, the anger aspect, which Carla Turner talks about, you know, a lot as well. And in the abduction phenomenon, there's one person then the next session had told me how that actually helped, you know, that how she like got into her power and like was like, you know, basically off, you know, get away from me, no, you know, standing her ground in her power, and boom, and the being just you know, yielded and stopped from going ahead to do whatever it wanted to do. That's one example. Yeah.
Because we think things are all powerful.
Exactly. See, that's the whole thing. They, you know, same with the psychopaths or like these hyperdimensional beings. They play with us. They are not as powerful as they make themselves out to be. You know, they want us to believe that. You know, even like all these psychopaths in power, they're the minority. You know, the manipulation happens through the manipulation of consciousness, of beliefs, and we have been fed for thousands of years through religion and government and education institutions, you know. So you look like an alien right now. so what happened?
You got me, dude. You know, you bring up.
So the manipulation happens through the manipulation of consciousness, of beliefs, you know what I mean, and through and that mind control, you know, it's not necessarily a martial physical control, you know.
Absolutely. Like one of the greatest points in your article about the UFOs, the alien deception, is that the alien invasion has already happened. Why do you have to come marching with guns and lasers and all that when you can just get people to enslave themselves and enjoy it?
Yeah. It's all disinformation. This whole idea of alien invasion we see in Hollywood, you know, like what's in Independence Day, or, you know, I mean, whatever. It's just like, no, that's like, I mean, even bringing in common sense, you know, highly developed other civilization would not fight a war with primitive means like we do as humans, right? So there's a whole different aspect.
Absolutely. I just want to mention Carla Turner, an amazing researcher, and she passed away under dubious circumstances. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, from what I've read about, she was just a very amazing one, very outspoken, really went there in a time when, you know, everybody was like wanting to go there into this dark aspect. And she, for the first time, was really like, no, we need to, you know, consider all these other anomalies that happen in abduction reports and not, you know, have like a, you know, attachment to a certain view and just bring it all together. You know, and she was harassed by agents and her husband as well. She's an abductee herself and her husband as well, you know, and her personal story is fascinating. And at some point, she developed this very strange, fast-acting cancer, which took her out, and she just died, you know. So I don't know exactly the circumstances and how and whatnot, but it just does sound very suspicious.
Yeah, really. Hugo Chavez got hit with that too, so we know that's real. You can get cancer if you're a bad boy. But it just goes to show us how afraid these beings are of being discovered. You know, they have this fugitive mentality, you know, as they feed off of us. You know, it's this, they have this incredible fear that they're going to be discovered, and we have to understand as humans that we're so much more powerful than they are. They wish they could be like us. One of my friends chatting with is talking about it right now. He says he knows 3 kinds of these quote-unquote aliens, and that they really do envy us immensely.
Right. Well, I don't know about envy or like in the sense of like, but I just also like, I also sometimes like to talk about in the sense that there's nothing wrong with the whole setup. It's in the sense, just understanding that as above, as below. In many ways, we are food, and there's, in a sense, no different than how we use, like I said in this documentary as well, lower life forms, plant and animals, as resources and food. Even plant and animals has conscience on a certain level, and they also have their own defense mechanisms developed to not be food or whatever. You know what I mean? And the same for us. We just have to learn. You learn. Or the lesson is not to be manipulated. You know what I mean? To say no, basically, right? So, in that sense, also, in a roundabout way, talking about duality, the dark and light, these forces help, quote unquote, through the friction, through the suffering created, help us to actually evolve. To really get into our own power, work through our conditioning. So that it's almost, there's control and manipulation, but at the same time, this is also part of evolution, right? To really step into our power to evolve and raise consciousness and awareness.
Absolutely. I just want to go back to something you mentioned, and I used to think this was the topic of all topics, and that's the idea of masculine identity and how it's been utterly phased out and crushed from our civilization. And the end result is that we don't have men anymore, and our women, God bless them, are trying to compensate for that, but they really can't, because it takes a very unique structure to create masculinity, which is really an artificial social construct. It doesn't just happen. Like, girls become women just naturally, but for boys to become men, there needs to be a sacred space, a sacred elder, an initiation, and a system, where the man places the community above himself. All that's been taken away from us.
The rite of passage. Yeah.
Absolutely. So now we're just left floundering about, and there's no real resistance. Like, are we? You notice this? Our women have more cojones than we do now. Like, they're the ones.
I totally agree. Like, a lot of people, I'm networking a lot of people on Facebook, and when I get in discussions, and I have to say, most of the people who really are switched on, and I can really go deep with it, are actually more women than men. For some reason, pretty fascinating. Like, oh wow, okay, she gets it. It's really fascinating. And it's not to be said we as men definitely need to also like let men have lost a different aspect to get in touch more with our vulnerability. You know what I mean? The feminine aspect, so to speak, and show that. But again, there needs to be the balance. And like you said, the whole idea of masculinity and the feminine principle has been distorted, and people project their own things into it, and it's a whole mess. I mean, same with feminism. I feel feminism is also very much a distortion of the feminine principle. It's actually trying to become more male than like understanding to create balance within.
Oh, absolutely. Feminism is an attack against masculinity and ultimately an attack against femininity. Because, once if there's no masculinity, women kind of go crazy because, they don't have anyone to really keep them company anymore, so they have to start putting the pants on, and then they're miserable. That's why we're living in a world where everyone is miserable and lonely right now, because it really is an amazing topic. When I was in college, I discovered this book on the shelf of Barnes & Nobles. And I read the title. I thought it was some video game thing. So I picked it up and read it. And the name of the title was King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, Rediscovering the Archetypes of the Male Masculine, by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette, an anthropologist and a psychotherapist. And they created this structure of masculinity that had 4 archetypes: the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover. And each one of these governed a certain way of thinking. For example, the king was altruism, generativity, nurturing. The warrior was defending your boundaries. The magician was your skills, your knowledge, etc. And the lover was your compassion, your energy, your passion for doing things, your love, naturally. And there are 4 types of love. There's agape, storge, filial love, and erotic love. So when you look at people in that model, you can really like figure it out. Like, oh, when you notice that, you notice most men don't have an inner warrior at all. Most men, they develop we're taught to develop our lover first, but even then it's stilted because it describes each archetype as a triangle, and on the poles are like the extremes. For example, the warrior, either you're the tyrant or you're the weakling. And if you're on those opposites, a tyrant can become a weakling if you just stand up to him, and a weakling can become a tyrant if you just push him too hard. He'll switch over. But up at the top, in the center, in the middle, is the warrior. The balanced state, and that goes for each of the 4 archetypes. I think it's actually a brilliant system.
That's interesting.
I pointed out to you because I think you'd really enjoy reading it. I bought all 4 volumes and I read it, and it really helped me to understand myself. So I started doing boxing and MMA because I thought it would help my inner warrior a little bit because I was too soft. It taught me a few things about myself, but I really think that's an important topic. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. No, so, I mean, I can just reflect in my own life. Like, I had to work through a lot of childhood wounding, relating to shame and guilt, and I had to step into my warrior self and stand up and have healthy boundaries and say no, and not always say yes, and you know what I mean, and not feel guilty if I say no, and just really hold that ground. And I think what you said about this book relates also to the other film I made with my friend, Love, Reality in a Time of Transition. I don't know, have you seen that yet?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Excellent film, stupendous. That's where I got the title for this film.
Right, the true nature of love. I talk about it like, where it's more like a lot of people get stuck in the romanticism, you know what I mean, of all these projections and just sexual attraction and mistaking that as love. When in fact it takes a lot of self-work to activate the quote-unquote higher centers and really connect on all levels, like you mentioned, like sexual, spiritual, the emotional, and all of that, right? And that needs continuing self-work, and look to our partners where we engage. It's these are lessons. We never find the perfect partner. So most of the time, always people which back us in order to evolve and again raise our consciousness.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, one of my favorite articles that you wrote is about ayahuasca, marijuana, tobacco, psychedelics, and how they've been angelicized in our modern counterculture media. People like Terence McKenna, etc., and how they can actually have very negative effects. And your journey through that is an amazing article. I would like if you just touch upon that.
I can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think we got some real interference there. Can you hear me now?
No, I got you back. Yeah.
Hello?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm sorry. Did you get what I said about that amazing article you wrote about ayahuasca, psychedelics, marijuana, and how they've been angelicized in our counterculture? But through your journey, you've seen that they don't really help you gain consciousness and awareness as we've been taught to believe, not under the circumstances most people use them anyway.
Yeah, no, definitely. They can be actually, I feel, very harmful on an energetic level for one's esoteric and spiritual development, and very much a distraction. And as I wrote in the article, I've fallen into the same trap, and I also tried not to throw the baby with the bathwater. I think they have their place, especially ayahuasca, when used in a certain context. Definitely not any of these psychedelics with partying or recreational, but I've seen definitely a lot of healing, and it's been helpful in my life and others working with ayahuasca, but if combined really with sincere, deeper self-work and even psychotherapeutic work. Because it shows a lot of things, but the lesson is really to integrate all of that and do the work when you're not off of them. It's a crutch, it's a tool. And the more often you do it and you kind of get attached to that path, then it can be detrimental in the long run for sure. So I advise. A lot of people have a lot of emotional attachment and wishful thinking because they mistake these beautiful experiences they have, which are, basically a chemical reaction because of the substance you eat. But the whole point is to really go there and work through this without any substance or anything else, to really establish a foundation and really work through that instead of being, so to speak, not addicted, but almost like taking an outside substance, so to speak. I mean, it's a very touchy subject, It's oof.
Well, you handled it very well. Very.
Well, it was a topic. It was a topic close to my heart because I was a huge McKenna fan. And I go that's how I got introduced to these psychedelics as well at partying. I was here out in the desert, moon tribe, raves, and boom, that's it. That's just the way it happens. But then also quickly oh my God, there's something else. So I worked a lot on my own. I didn't do it at parties anymore, and I got deep into the medicine path, DMT, ayahuasca. Went to Peru four times so far, and really worked with it. But I also realized, had to acknowledge to myself that I hit a dead end, and I was lying to myself, and I needed to really walk this path sober and really just work on some basic psychology myself, because a lot of that I thought I had healed and all these insights, but it was too much coming out. Like your psyche opens up and there's almost too much, and I think it can be actually very dangerous and detrimental for people who are dealing with severe trauma. They're not aware of it, can open up parts of their psyche they're not able to integrate or heal.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the best points you made, which I think is a core point, is that when you're on these psychedelics and you're, say, in a party scene or just the people around you, or maybe even just the place or your mood, you make yourself vulnerable to these hyperdimensional beings.
Yes.
And you mentioned a situation where this insectoid type hyperdimensional vision you had lunged at you.
Yes.
And you could feel a drainage afterwards. So it was very real what happened to you. You were attacked by a spiritual parasite.
Yeah. And yes, so to speak. And I was actually this reptilian, shape form, whatever, that launched into on my chest. And for days afterwards, I was just I was out of it. And I felt I have taken on some sort of spiritual attachment, So it took me a lot of work and and to really get rid of it and to just sincere self work and also stepping away from all this, these psychedelics. And that particular incident happened with me on DMT actually,
Absolutely.
And again, that's what I also, once I got more into the whole hyperdimensional aspect of reality and learned about spirit attachment, I'm like, oh my God, that puts the whole psychedelic movement in a whole new perspective. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like any of those raves out there, any of these festivals, Burning Man or Lighting in the Bottle, well, a lot of people are doing these drugs. It's a feeding ground for these beings. It's lunchtime, so to speak.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
It is intense. And once I remember when I went to Lighting in the Bottle for research in 2011, and just being in that atmosphere, and I was completely sober there with my friend, and just once your eyes are open, you see it. Oh my God, there's this underlying, this dense sexual energy. You know what I mean? Which it's just there, and I'm not saying it's negative, but it's just there's a lower consciousness, and people are completely mistaking that something spiritual, and lying to themselves. But you can really sense that energy, that something is off. And Alex Gray, he's a well-known visionary artist. I don't know if you've heard of him. I quoted him, and he had similar experiences, right, where he took on attachments by these beings. And that happens all the time. And most of all, if you really research deep into spirit attachments, especially Dr. William Baldwin's work, I mentioned in this blog as well, everyone is dealing with spirit attachments to one degree or another in one's life. But they're not that obvious, because they just manifest in our own thoughts, our own behaviors in subtle ways, and even addictions and irrational behaviors, that we think that, we don't make the connection. There's actually something else operating through us, and we have taken on, But again, yes, psychedelics, opening your consciousness like that, without any restraints to the higher levels, without understanding that, there are other beings. It's a jungle that's far worse dangerous than any physical jungle out here, And again, also understanding that a lot of these negative forces, again, can appear as angels of light and be very deceiving and deceptive. So the whole idea, again, which ties in back to the UFO phenomenon, just because you felt love and all this experience has been amazing, it's not necessarily that it's been in your interest, right?
Absolutely. It really does frame, a Burning Man and all those type events in a whole new light. It's like a Archon cafeteria.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah, in many ways, and it's fascinating when you look at also the esoteric teachings that I mentioned. In particular, this book is fascinating, Gnosis by Boris Muraviev, and he talks about the deception where the children of the light will be deceived by all this mystical phenomena and by false prophets and false teachings and all of that, and how people oversimplify things and claim that truth must be simple and and everything comes easy, and and we see that a lot in this so-called conscious movements today, and also the New Age or hippie movement or whatever you may want to call it.
Absolutely, yeah. You made a great point in your article. I think it was your article where I read this, where how the hippie movement was created to be as absolutely repugnant and repulsive to mainstream America as possible, so as to ensure no critical mass would be gained. A brilliant divide and conquer strategy when you think about it.
Yeah, very fascinating. And my friend and researcher Jan Irvin has really done amazing work in that regard, and he opened me up, even helped me to connect more dots. And he's getting a lot of attacks for his work as well. I mean, even more than I am, because he's a thorn in the eyes of many people.
I would love to get both of you guys talking. I think that would be a tour de force.
I love him. He's well spoken. He's good. So definitely I had to confront my own cognitive dissonance with this as well, because again, I was really plugged into the psychedelic movement. I was a big fan of McKenna, even Larian, and until whoa. But Jan, he comes from his perspective. I approach it from a different perspective. I also bring in this more the hyperdimensional aspect of manipulation, which makes also complete sense in terms of how the psychedelic movement has been maybe not just created, but vectored away and manipulated to a certain way for exactly that, to really, infuse people with very pop spiritual teachings, distorted esoteric spiritual teachings, and vector them away from truth, with this whole rise of positivity, of just feel good. Everything that feels good is good. Everything that doesn't feel good is bad. Don't look at the bad side. Think positive. Just be, and we all one. Just be love. It's actually a brilliant setup when you think of it. You know what I mean? I mean, I have to say sometimes in the light of the art of war, you kind of gotta give your enemy respect. I'm like, well done.
Absolutely. That's a brilliant point, because Chris Hedges talks about that in this self-help guru culture we have here, and how that's also a way just to herd people away from looking at the darkness, from facing the darkness, their own darkness and the darkness without too, thereby also emasculating the entire society and ensuring there'll be no resistance.
Yeah. And like you said before earlier, it's about empowerment. And my work is really, if people actually really read my work and also go to the resource and references, it's all about empowerment. And I get all these attacks, and people, shame me and have attacked me for my work. You're so negative, and what are you doing, and yada yada. But it's the exact opposite. My point is trying to empower, and you cannot. In order to empower yourself, you need to understand what's going on, to see the world more as it is. You need to look at the dark side of that, and dark is not necessarily bad. It's just what is unconscious, what is ignored. It's just as it is, right? And the more we see, again, goes back to the basic definition of the evolution of consciousness and what conscience actually means. Again, knowing more together, see things differently than before, gaining knowledge, do self-work, and really look at the world as it is without even dividing things into positive and negative. That's also another whole, these words have been so distorted over time, or the whole distortion when I talk about psychopaths, if I brought up, like a lot of people say, well, we need to get out of this us versus them thinking, right? This whole like, oh, the separation, us versus them, again, completely oversimplifying something like that and understanding how complex humanity is, right? That we're all one, but there are different levels of being, that people who are not here, who want actually to awaken, it's not even on the path, there is evil, people with no conscience, and in the sense, yes, they do, quote unquote, oppose our own evolution and manipulate us. So again, it's like, you cannot look at these terms as so black and white, like a lot of many people do, and then oversimplify a lot of these quote-unquote higher truths and try to apply them in our, very limited physical reality, which just doesn't work that way.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you've really done an amazing job of outlining this for people. Very partisan, very loaded with facts, stacked with references, very German. let's let's take it. Let's make it a little more American right now. A little more Monday Night Football. Just because we're Americans here mostly. We're all in America, so I just want to come on straight and say it for people. There are no aliens. They're not from other planets. They are hyperdimensional beings. They're referred to as the archons by the Gnostic Christians, referred to as the jinn by the Muslims, referred to as the nagas in the Vedic tradition. And these beings exist in an alternate reality. They can also phase into our reality and manipulate our reality. There's a lot of knowledge about these beings. I think I approach these beings from a different angle than you have. You came at them through the Gnostic tradition and using your own logic and perception. I first started discovering about them from the Muslim tradition. They call them the jinn there. That's where the word genie comes from. It means the unseen. And there's an enormous breadth of just knowledge about them. There's a whole chapter in the Quran about them, and they describe the three different types of them. There's a story about Solomon and the jinn and how God gave him the power to summon the jinn and use them to serve him. And how they can possess people. Apparently they can have children just like we do. They procreate. They live long lifespans, anywhere up to 3,000 years. Something I believe was mentioned, but there's no real source on that. And they also can have religion, just like us. Apparently, there's Jewish jinn, there's Christian jinn, and there's Muslim jinn. Among most of these scholars, Muslim scholars, there's not many of them now, but they agree that most of them are bad. They've been corrupted. And I'm sure there's some good ones, like there always are. I mean, I'm a block away from the State Department of the United Nations. It's like the heart of evil over here, but I'm trying to keep it real. So I want to factor in some of the knowledge that I've gotten from this tradition, and I want to see how it matches up with what you've learned from the Gnostic tradition. And I want to tell a story right now, which I think you'll find very interesting. And I won't say where it's from. I'll just say it's from one of the lost Gospels. And I thought I read a version of this story in the Bible, but I went back and I was reading Genesis last night and Isaiah and all that. I couldn't find it. But okay, it goes like this. Do you remember the story about how God asked all the angels in heaven to bow to his latest creation, which was Adam? Do you remember that story? And one disobeyed?
Yeah.
Well, I think the version in the Bible, I remember reading it there, it stopped where it just said this one angel said no. But there's another version of this story in one of these hidden gospels, quote unquote, and it goes on a little further and reveals three very interesting facts about the nature of this spiritual infection that we're fighting. So he tells all the angels to bow, and one of them says no, but it says he was one of those unseen beings, meaning that he wasn't an angel, he was a jinn. Because according to these sources, there are three kinds of beings: jinn, angels, and man. So this being wasn't actually an angel, because angels can't go bad. He was a jinn, very highly ranked among them apparently, since he was allowed to be there in heaven. And then God tells him, tell us why you refuse to bow to my creation. And then his answer is incredibly enlightening. He says, because you made me of fire, and you made him of clay. Thus I am nobler than he.
Mm.
What did he just say? He just came out as the world's first racial supremacist. I mean, it's like me saying I'm better than you because my eyes are hazel and your eyes are blue. Or I don't even need a reason.
Right,
I can just because. He just pulled it off
right,
the top of his head. You know, he was just being an asshole. He just told God he was wrong. You don't tell God
right.
he's wrong. And then that's the second fact. The first was that he was a jinn. And then the third fact we learn is that, God at that point, his original name, apparently, according to Sufi sources, was Azazel. I don't know if you've
Mm-hmm.
heard that name before.
Mm.
And God at that point told him, from now on you shall be known as Iblis, which means the despairing one. And, get the hell out of here. You're accursed. And then he asked God for one wish. He says, give me immortality until the day of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
God says, all right, fine. So, but from those three pieces of information, we understand that it's this racial supremacist chosen ideology that is really the root of this infection. We
Right.
understand that he wasn't an angel, he was a jinn. He was one of those hyperdimensional beings. So it would make sense that he would corrupt his own kind first, since they're right there, and use them to attack us. Naturally, that's what you do, right? You raise an army of your folks first and use them to prey upon
Right.
his most hated enemy, which is us. He hates Adam, the sons of Adam. And three, he's immortal now. He's the only one that is immortal. So we can understand how this intergenerational plan could be planned out by this, because it had to be a single intelligence that would
Right.
completely invert all science, religion, and history, and like this, like multiple minds can't do that. Democracy
Exactly.
won't.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a good point, because a lot of people are so focused on the 3D aspect of conspiracy, like the Illuminati, all these secret societies, and yada yada. You know what I mean? The government. It's fine and good. We need to deal with it, but like there's another causal level behind it. And again, like you mentioned, there's this hyperdimensional thread. How values and beliefs have been created over thousands and thousands of years. How whole society and world has become polarized, pathological values seen as normal, suggested through the alien mind, so to speak, and the hyperdimensional control system that's been inherent, and it's been going on for so long and we're being just distracted by shadows on the wall, Even in I see it a lot in the so-called truth movement, and the researchers there, they get distracted by all the secret society stuff, the Illuminati and this secret society.
The
So
Jesuits.
you know what I mean? Which in the sense are actually like red herrings in the sense, because the true masters, you would even, they're so secret you wouldn't even know. It's a very common tactic. Even in government, the whole COINTELPRO to put in false conspiracies, to lead on very gullible people, deal with this, and then so they don't become very discerning and don't dive any deeper. Again, and I see a lot of fallacy. I see a lot of truth seekers, popular, people out there, their fallacies, they're so focused on the outside, and they're missing again the inner work, the esoteric work. Really, you know what I mean? To understand, there's an aspect we need to align ourselves with, to perceive knowledge, to raise our level of being, so we can perceive reality more accurately. So I see that aspect not mentioned by many people who fight the system and in the conspiracy truthers world. You know what I mean? They're too focused on the outside. And then on the opposite hand, the New Age and other movement are in a very distorted way too narcissistically involved just into themselves, and distort the whole idea of self-work, right? So, but you're right, I see that's an interesting story, what I mean? It starts right there, and it confirms how everything, all the pathologies have been created by this other force, so to speak, And that ties in also the whole fallacy where people talk about human nature. Well, it's just human nature. War is human nature. This is human nature. I'm no, it's not. It's questioning that as well. What is really human nature,
Absolutely. That's a great point. I used to think humans were just hairless apes that just wanted to kill each other, but now we see, now I know it's not true at all. We're very noble, incredibly powerful beings, and most of us are incredibly good and want to be even better.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's interesting what you just shared.
Yeah, I want to make another point. I was reading the Bible again last night, and I found a passage in Isaiah. I forget exactly. I didn't write it down, but he basically said that there's going to come a time once we win, the good guys win, that everyone will gather around and check Iblis out, and Satan, aka Iblis, whatever you want to call him, the devil, and they'll all be looking at him like a zoo attraction and saying, "Is this the guy that was making the earth tremble? I mean, look at him; he's a joke." In the Gospel of Barnabas, yeah, I know how he looks like right now. I can actually see him in my mind. He's a really pathetic creature because in the Gospel of Barnabas, which is one of the hidden Gospels, um, it says that Archangel Michael cut off his legs. So he probably is like a hideous Smeagol type looking character, right, with no legs. And I believe the Sufi sources say his mother had the face of a tiger and his father had the face of a lion. So he's like a hideous feline Smeagol with no legs. The guy's a fucking piece of shit, man. And this is the guy that's fucking us over with just by talking. Talking is bullshit and effective.
Yeah.
So
and most important is understand how this manipulation works through us, and even and it manifests in psychological issues and in between people. And it works, what a lot of truth seekers out there who are so focused on the outside have to understand that it also affects them. I recently got into work by Paul Levy. I don't know if you heard of him. He wrote a book, Wetiko, Dispelling the Curse of Evil. And he, kind of explains the polarization of society in the form of this Wetiko virus, which is the Native Americans and other indigenous people saw as a psycho-spiritual disease that has taken over humanity. And it affects everyone. It works through all of us. Like Carlos Castaneda, Wetiko, yeah. And, or Wetiko, I don't know how to pronounce it. And it relates to Carlos Castaneda's predator mind, you know what I mean? So that's the whole thing, we are all affected by it, you know what I mean? And if you don't, again, I have to hammer the point, if we don't engage in sincere self-work, and I mean sincere, it's not like, reading The Power of Now or doing some meditation here and there, you know what I mean? I mean, it's, doing spiritual work and deep psychotherapeutic work in order to cut off that food source, to cut off, understand the predator mind, so we don't fall into what Gurdjieff called the trap of the revolutionary mind, which I see a lot of people fall into, becoming very reactive, fighting, the shadows on the wall, similar to the mythology of Don Quixote. I don't know, Don Quixote of fighting the windmills, you know what I mean? So then in that case, they actually do exactly, you become that which you're fighting against. You know what I mean? You become the predator mind. You become the what you get exactly placed in the hand of our hyperdimensional overlords, so to speak. So that's why I realize more and more, understanding psychopathy, it's extremely important. How that affects our world. That's kind of like the 3D manifestation of this hyperdimensional control system. And also understanding more like the UFO phenomena for what it truly is, not a physical phenomena, but has been affecting our world for thousands of years, is crucial to understand. And then again, basic self-work. That's to empower ourselves so we can truly evolve to a point where we truly have free will. Don't react just mechanically from conditioning or reactiveness, right? I mean, it comes even down on such a basic level. Like a lot of truthers out there, I might call them, talk about, especially in America nowadays, they talk about all the conspiracy 9/11, but they're still so attached to a national identification, for example. Bring back the institution, our country, our government, that already is an illusion right there. The whole idea of you identify yourself with a man-made concept, like a nation, like a flag. It's like, no, you weren't born like this. It's a whole it's a belief system that really traps you, in so many ways.
absolutely, excellent points, especially about proper resistance. It can't be about fighting against them. First, we do have to fight against them, but first we have to realize that we're not the rebels. They're the rebels.
Right.
So our
and also
system,
that we can be our own worst enemy if we don't really do our own self-work. It's self-sabotage, react mechanically, conditioning, have our own filters, and, Gurdjieff is amazing. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He wrote a great deal about it in Search of the Miraculous. I mean, Ouspensky wrote it about Gurdjieff, but Gurdjieff is quoted there a lot about how people are machines, how they react unconsciously, you know what I mean? So we need to work towards becoming conscious again, so we're round circle about that.
Absolutely. We need to clean up our chakras too, so we don't give these guys a way in. You notice in this society, they usually get into the lowest chakra, you know.
No shock, and they get in, those other dimensional beings also get us where we are the weakest. It's almost they know our individual blind spots. They can tempt us, you know. I've seen it in my own life in many ways. You know, they really hook ourselves in. So you have to also be acknowledging, empower yourself, but acknowledge your weaknesses. What is what Gurdjieff calls your chief fault, right? Which your main lessons in this life, where you always get pulled off or tempted with and distracted. You know, we all have them in our own ways, in different ways.
Absolutely. We have to make sure our armor doesn't have any holes before we really, you know, really can offer any real resistance.
Great analogy, you know. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow, this has been pretty mind-blowing, Bernhard. I think a lot of people aren't going to be ready for what you're saying, but those that are, will you really help them get to the next level. And for me, it's not about raising up the masses, because I don't think I don't think we can help them. I think we have to focus more on finding those that are ready and those that
Absolutely.
are strong,
Yes.
and
Absolutely.
bringing them up and making them even stronger, than all of us working together. Then we can have a real
Yes.
spiritual resistance.
I absolutely agree. I don't see here like a collective awakening happening anytime soon, nor am I interested in saving the world. This is not about saving the world or any of that. You know, it's just really like connecting with like-minded people. I feel it's very important, especially the work I am in you as well, to connect with people who talk about that. You know what I mean? And we are collinear and give each other feedback and help each other and you know, network with others and see what happens. I mean, the future is not a set in stone, but we're certainly far away from any collective awakening where we're just going to have a peace party with the aliens.
Absolutely, yeah. That's you know, it's. I want to give a few more examples for people, because you know, my big thing now, I keep harping on it like a broken record. I call it the 180-degree rule. You know, and this is, I think it's called the big lie. You know, and they're the masters of this. You know, these creatures. That's where it comes. It comes from them, because they always preempt you. Like they'll rape your daughter, and they can come out in the media and say, "Oh, your daughter actually raped me," and then sue you for damages. And no one would believe that anything else. Was like, how could anyone come out like that? So it's, and you see this pattern constantly. Like, for example, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, they say that David killed his best friend, had him killed in a battle, so he could bang his wife, right?
Right.
Not even the lowest street scum I know would have done that. I mean, really now. And the real story is, I'll tell you the real story. It's again from one of these hidden gospels, this apocrypha, that two angels came to King David, and they came dressed as men, normal men, and one was rich and one was poor. And the poor man said to King David, "This is my brother. He is wealthy. He has 99 ewe lambs, female lambs. I only have one lamb, and he took my one lamb from me by tricking me. Judge between us." And then David judged fairly upon them. He told the rich man, "You would take his one little ewe lamb from him?" It's like a sociopathic act. What did David do? He said, "You're going to give him 50 lambs. So now you two are equal."
Right.
So you can see how that story, you can see how the story in the Old Testament is like a twisted, complete, and total perversion of that story that I just told you. That's how this mindset works. Like,
well, when you look at the whole, like how God has been displayed in this monotheistic religion, displayed and distorted in the Bible, he is a complete psychopath. The way he's depicted, you know what I mean? Depicted. So it's you know, no wonder that people take on these values, because it's the word of God.
yeah, the Old Testament has been a serious problem. And I just want to say again, in the tradition of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, you know, I've read the Old Testament many times, and while all the prophets are totally blasphemed, especially Moses and David, and God is some kind of monster, there's still a lot of truth in the Old Testament in accordance to science and cosmology. And I'm always picking through for it for clues about science. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater there.
Especially esoterically, out of these tales, you got to not take them literal anyways, you know, and really decipher the meaning.
Absolutely. This has been an amazing chat. I think I want to see more and more of this happening. I would love it if next time you would join us, and maybe you and Jan could go at it.
No, totally. Yeah.
I think we need to start seeing more of this, like start really seeing, because it's people like you that are going to be the teachers, or really are the teachers now for a new age, because your heart is in the right place. You might
Just
not
call
be.
me New Age teacher.
No. We're in the new age, but we're taking it back to the old age. We're old school. We're taking it way back.
Just trying to get the foundation going here.
Yeah, exactly. We need to get the foundation going. The trivium, the quadridium, and just getting this knowledge out there, bringing these traditions like the Gnostic tradition and the Islamic tradition and the Vedic tradition and the Taoist tradition together, and getting out all the good bits and pieces and figuring out the truth. That's really how we're going to heal. That's how we're going to build a real foundation of knowledge. That's how we're going to build consciousness.
Exactly. And you know what I just realized from what you read me about this excerpt from, what was it, some Sufist teaching or Muslim teaching?
The story about Iblis and how he...
Exactly.
That's from the Quran. That's
from the Quran, exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's very interesting because it completely confirms everything else. How other esoteric teachings have talked about the same phenomenon. It's interesting. Over the past week, I had this very interesting conversation with this woman who showed me a lot of interesting teachings of yoga, more yoga esoteric teachings, which I had, I feel like a lot of this stuff from the East, especially yoga philosophy, has also become watered down, and certain knowledge has been suppressed, So she sent me a lot of interesting stuff, which also, like, that teaching talks about its own ways in the yoga philosophy with their own words and language, exactly about the same thing, about these other dimensional beings, the evil, they are separate from us, the hyperdimensional control, how negative forces can appear as positive ones, and even touched into the topic of soulless people, organic portals, which I wrote about as well, which is Boris Moraviev writes in Gnosis, right? How other people become literally these portals animated by these other dimensional beings and trying to attack anyone who's trying to escape the Matrix. It's very, very much like the analogy in the film The Matrix, when Agent Smith inserts himself into different people trying to get to Neo, trying to keep him from escaping the Matrix, basically. And it's a brilliant analogy. That's what's happening, and that's what we're dealing with. Like the problem, like once you start to wake up and really are on the path of truth, there will be forces set up on you trying to keep you down, trying to deflect you. You know what I mean? So, and we all experience it in our own ways, But I would also experience, if you really align yourself with truth and stay in your integrity and go your path, eventually the universe will also support you, because there are also positive beings, whatever, that support you and will guide you in more subtle ways, right? You just, again, it's just the more you learn your own lessons, show your sincerity, you're also being guided and helped in many ways. So it's not as bleak. We're very powerful in that regard. But aligning yourself with truth is very tricky, because it entails to also face the lies in the world and within yourself, and that is, like we talked at the beginning, is hard for many, many people to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. You bring up several great points, but the main one I want to drive to people is that how powerful we really are, because the spiritual source that we can draw upon is infinitely more powerful than the spiritual sources they draw upon. Because those spiritual sources are using them, are lying to them. Those spiritual sources don't have the power to give them what they promised them. They can't make them immortal. We have to understand that these secret societies, and at the top level, they're all about summoning these archons and jinns, these seances and all that. That's what they're about. And they can attack us as well, psychically. But if we just ask for help from the source, there's nothing they can do to us. They cannot hurt us. They are pathetic, big-headed little shits.
And also understanding that knowledge protects. It's not, like, prayer and all these things helps as well, and all, but in the end, it's again about knowledge protects, like raising your awareness, gaining knowledge, embodying it, and the more you know, the more you see. You also create you raise your high. That's actually the true meaning of raising frequency and your consciousness. It's not about this whole New Age distortion about love and just heart-centered and we need to be all loving and raise, what I mean? Love is knowledge. That's actually the esoteric where love is light is knowledge. It's like, boom, seeing more objectively, and the more you see, you raise your frequency, and then these beings cannot affect you anymore like as if you stay in ignorance.
That's an amazing point. Love is light is knowledge. So esoterically, when they talk about love, they're really talking about knowledge.
Yes. Yes.
Wow. Wow, that's huge because, when the way love has been framed from us, NLP style is as passivity, vulnerability, weakness. But
yeah,
we're
and
talking
also mostly just as an emotional state. This feeling, So
exactly. So it's really about knowledge.
Love is a state of consciousness. You know what I mean? And you have, to be loved, you have to know what love is. And we're talking about knowledge, not about like an intellectual thing of memorizing facts. There's a deeper side to in the esoteric aspect of knowledge, gnosis. Embodied knowledge.
Absolutely. And on that note, I think, that's amazing. You just dropped an immense amount of knowledge on us, Mr. Guenther. I think that's going to leave people quite a bit to think about for a little while. I hope we can do this again and soon because the amount of knowledge that you've got to share with us is immense. So it's been an absolute pleasure. I feel that I've leveled up just listening to you. And thank you again. I think that last closing statement is so powerful, people. They have to understand. Love is light, is knowledge. Consciousness is knowing together. Right. So thank you so much, brother.
That was really, thank you. That was fun. Totally.
It was fun. I hope. Bye, everybody. We'll see you again. Maybe next week.
Anybody can go just to my website, veilofreality.com, where
EILofreality.com.
EILofreality.com.
And you also have a YouTube channel as well.
Exactly, and there's all these articles and a lot of resource material, and within my articles I always have a lot of hyperlinks where I link to the resources of stuff I've studied and whatnot, and people should I encourage them to do their own work, to dive deep, and and do the work, so to speak.
Absolutely. Like your articles are so well referenced and footnoted, and you just provide links to books and it's so much. It's absolutely mind-bending. They have to actually do the work. They have to start with the videos, read the articles, follow the leads. It's absolutely a new path that you've introduced me to. You've introduced me to at least 5 new amazing researchers that I want to follow up on now, so my reading pile is like 10 times longer now. Thanks.
And on that note, I just want to say real quick, we have to be gentle with ourselves too, and have patience with ourselves, because everybody's on a different level. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't come to all this understanding over night. It took me years, a lot of disillusionment, and there's a process, and it's different for each. And even in the esoteric tradition, we cannot skip steps. You know what I mean? So there's no fast road, There are no shortcuts or any of that, So it is really like a step-by-step process, and that's, again, it's different for each, because it all again comes down to the right foundation, because even if Gurdjieff said if we start off the wrong foundation, then the results are worse than before, because the whole, everything will be crumbling down anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You frame the struggle, the journey in a very real way for people. There are real repercussions to pay. If you drop that acid or LSD at some rave party, you're going to walk out a lot weaker.
Yeah.
It's going to stay with you for years, and it's going to affect everything, including your wealth, your relationships. So we're in a real game right here, and the more we know, the better. So the only thing to do is do the work, right? Read. Read, Americans.
Read and the self-work, let's not make it all heady, get into your, for me, what helps me in my personal process, I have a nice balance between my research writing and also doing body work. I do a lot of body-mind. I do Qigong and yoga on a regular basis, receive body work to get into my body, you know what I mean? Because a lot of emotions and things are stored in the body, which is a big part of self-work as well. So I definitely, encouraged not just to make it an intellectual head thing. You know what I mean? It's again the balance, all the chakras, all the centers. You know, we need to work on everything, you know, in a balanced way, so to speak.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. So veilofreality.com, one of the most amazing blogs I've ever seen. So well researched, so well structured, and so partisan and well presented. Very, very Teutonic. like a BMW, like the BMW engine.
Nice.
But us Americans can still get through it. I did. The documentary is absolutely awesome. There are 3 documentaries to watch. One is Know Thyself, found on his YouTube channel, and the other one is The Time of Transition.
Love, Reality, and the Time of Transition.
Love, Reality, and the Time of Transition. Absolutely excellent expose on the whole counterculture, LSD, hippie movement of the 60s and how it's been, and the New Age movement and how they've all been co-opted. And of course, the first one I saw, let me see, what is it called exactly?
UFOs, Aliens, and the Question of Contact.
Yes, absolutely. A stunning piece of work, artistically beautiful. Especially in the middle part, the tactics that you reveal of these creatures is absolutely, I've never heard any of that before, but it makes perfect sense. So it made so many connections for me. Only the bravest should really go down that road and begin the great work, or the greatest, what did you call it?
The what? The great work?
The great work, yeah, or the greatest challenge. Absolutely. So thank you so much, Mr. Bernhard Guenther. I appreciate it. I think everyone else does too. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Until next time.